organisers for giving me the last slot. And,
Yeah,
thank you to you for sticking it out. I'm a bit worried about turning the lights off with this.
See, it's one of mine.
I think the slides should be clear enough.
At least you can watch if they sleep.
I think the environmental lobby has been asking for low carbon power generation and been really pushing this, and governments have taken up the call, and large NGOs are pushing it, and big targets are being set for development of wind energy around the world, and it's increasing exponentially in Europe, in America, China, all over the world, and it's really just starting to take off in Africa now. And so we should all be quite happy about it, but there is really a very dark side to wind energy, and there's a lot of publications now in the literature, and I encourage you to follow up on some of those, particularly in terms of impacts on birds, both your onshore and offshore birds and bats. The problem in Africa is there's actually almost no work that has been done on this subject. We've got much richer diversity of bird life than in Europe and in the States and other places where these things have been taking place and where EIs have been done. We've got bat assemblages that we just know nothing about. We don't know anything about their population sizes, what they do, what their role in the systems are, and so on. So it's unfortunately what's happened. It's a new sort of gold rush. The developers have seen an opportunity here to go to government and say, here's something to save you, and here's something to make you look good in terms of this whole carbon story. And so I think we just need to balance that with a better understanding of what's actually going on and what some of the risks are. So I'm going to start my talk, because it's late in the day. I'll give you the conclusion in the title of the talk, so that in case you're not off later. But we've done some analysis on the impact of some proposed wind farms in Lesotho on bearded and Cape vultures, and the picture's not pretty. So we're anticipating some quite big impacts. I sort of sat behind the computer. Sonia's done 10 years of lovely field work and research and flying around the Drakensberg, and has really collected most of the data that has been used for this. So really the idea is to look at the population level impacts of wind farm developments of two proposed farms that are currently going through the process in Lesotho on two species of vultures in the Maluti-Drakensberg system. And I'm focusing here on the population level impacts. There's a lot of published stuff from Europe that talks about collision rates, X number of birds per turbine per year, and so on. But it's quite difficult, what does that mean at a population level? So what I wanted to do is get to population level impacts. And as I said, there's a lot of published stuff overseas. And again, that has identified that large soaring birds are particularly vulnerable to collision. So we would anticipate up front that vultures are going to be particularly susceptible to collisions. The other thing is what's been shown in the States and Europe is that the areas that engineers are choosing for wind farms are the same areas that birds are choosing for foraging and soaring, and for the same reasons, because there's good wind and good lift for the birds. So you immediately are now putting these two things in direct conflict. And then, of course, with something like vultures, large birds, low reproductive rates, so any additional mortality can potentially be quite an impact. And then just coming out in the last couple of years, and I think we've always wondered why you mark power lines but birds still carry on flying into them. But there's been work done on the gyps vultures now, looking at their visual fields, and you would think vultures, their eyesight's 8 times better than ours. They can see things from a long way away. Why don't they see a wind farm, and why do they carry on flying into these things? But they've now done the work to show that from an evolutionary perspective, these birds have evolved to look down for food, so they're looking down and to the sides, so that they don't crash into other vultures, but they're not looking ahead of them. So when you start talking about mitigation, these birds have got no evolutionary experience of looking ahead of them really while they're flying, and so you can make these things as visible as you want, but birds will carry on flying into them. So there's some quite nice literature on that now that I encourage you to read. And then, of course, there's one thing having the wind, the towers, the turbines, but associated with that is a whole huge increase in the network of power lines. And so what I'm going to present to you is the impact potentially of some turbines. But just remember then there's the additional impact of all the extra infrastructure, the monitoring towers, and all the extra power lines that goes with that. So in case you don't believe me that these things kill vultures, this is from Spain. These are gyps fulvus, and you can collect them by the bucket load underneath these towers. Some of these towers are killing 8 vultures per tower per year. So they're losing about 1,000 gyps vultures in Spain alone a year. Okay. Now that sort of level of impact here would not be sustainable. It wouldn't have been sustainable in Europe 20 years ago, but they've had a massive program to take their vulture populations from where ours are now up to sort of 20, 30,000. So they can sustain some impact, but not for too long. And there's also some, well, I won't say nice YouTube videos, but if you want to see what it actually looks like, it's pretty horrendous. So the two birds we're going to be talking about, Cape vultures and bearded vultures. And so the beardeds in southern Africa are restricted to the Maluti-Drakensberg highlands. They used to occur all the way down to Table Mountain, but they're now restricted to this area. We're estimating 100 breeding pairs left. Okay, so a global population of 330 birds. These birds are genetically distinct from the next major population, which is essentially Ethiopia. There's a few birds still kicking around in Kenya, Uganda, but basically it's here, and then it's Ethiopian population is the next one. And the current population is declining by more than 1% per annum, so about 1.4% per annum. So already there's a population that's in quite a steep decline, and that's poisoning, power lines, and muti, muti use of the three key things. The Cape vultures, I still call them Cape vultures. I don't know if they're supposed to be called Cape griffins, but anyway, I call them Cape vultures. South African endemic. The current estimate from sort of last year is that the global population is sitting at around about 8,000 birds, which is made up of 2,900 breeding pairs, and about 20% of those occur in the Drakensberg system. So just to give you an idea again, in the last couple of years, Cape vultures have become extinct as a breeding bird in Namibia, poisoning. I think they're extinct as a breeding bird in Zimbabwe. And then there's three sort of core areas. There's this northern population going just into Botswana, and then there's this Drakensberg Eastern Cape coastal population, and then there's a relic population down there at De Hoop in the Cape. And these are the number of pairs in each of these areas. So you can see that is the core, but that this is a really important part of the global population of the species. Just to give you an idea of what the study area is, this is the basalt highlands of Lesotho, coming into the KZN border over there, into the World Heritage Site, Free State KZN border there, and coming down into the Eastern Cape down here. And then the two wind farms that we currently are commenting on, one is in this, just for lack of, or just for simplifying the name, we call the one the Oxbow, and so that's quite close, in close proximity to Royal Natal. In fact, you'll see it when you're on the top of the amphitheatre. And then there's another one at Letsing, which is on the main road near the Letsing diamond mine. Okay, so what did we do? We used Vortex as a population viability analysis model to try and predict the impacts by plugging in baseline data, most of which is collected locally and most of which is current, some of which is from previous research in this part of the world, and some of which is extrapolated or imported from other studies elsewhere in the world. But essentially the best possible data sets we could get. And then we had to calibrate the baseline model. So we created the baseline model with those parameters, and that was calibrated with real data on observed population trends over time. So we made sure that the baseline model fitted the observed trend of what we have observed of both those species through the last 20 to 30 years of monitoring data. And then I won't go into this too much now, but we had to think about how to model the impacts of wind farms. So there's quite a lot of data, as I say, from other parts of the world where they look at collision rates or number of mortalities per turbine per year. And so up to a point you could extrapolate some of those if you choose your sites carefully and then say, well, if we've got X number of towers, that could result in so many mortalities. But I'll show you the picture just now. We took a slightly sort of a hybrid approach of looking at breeding birds for bearded vultures, which tend to have a core area. They forage around their nest site in about a 15-kilometer radius. Whereas the juveniles just move, they can be in Golden Gate one day, next week they're in the Eastern Cape. They move across that whole Drakensberg system. So no matter where a wind farm is, the juvenile bearded vulture is at risk. Okay, whereas the pairs that are in the area where the wind farm, the adults that are in the area where the wind farm is built are at most risk, and other adults are at least risk. So we try to incorporate that into the model. And then so with looking at that, we looked at real data of where the actual nest sites were, where the actual proposed developments were, and we looked at the number of nest sites that were at risk within different distances of the proposed developments, and looked at those with different mortality risks. And then we looked at for the juveniles a constant mortality rate, essentially, because we said, no matter how few juveniles there are, all of them will be at risk, and because they all move around the system so far. So whereas the adults, your mortality decreases as the population size decreases. With the juveniles, there's the same number at risk. So we could debate that a bit more. The two proposals at the moment are for 80 structures, and they're about some are 90 meters tall, and the rest are 100 meters tall. Just to give you an idea of what I'm talking about, this is real data this is 1 week's of data for bearded vulture. So these are adult birds here, and you can see how they are keeping to fairly small areas. That is a radius of about 15 kilometers. Whereas you look at these immature birds, and this is 1 week, just bear in mind 1 week's movement, you can see they're moving over much bigger areas. So hence why we modeled them differently in the process. Okay. And then we used a lot of GPS satellite tag data. There's a total of 13.5 bird years of data, 10,500 individual points that were used for the analysis. And we only had 2 capes with GPS data on, and that is a limitation on the cape stuff. And then what we did is each position fix has an altitude estimate, and then we worked out the actual flying height of the birds to then try and work out what proportion of their time they're in risk, that they're flying within the actual blade height of the towers. So we did that by subtracting the recorded height of the bird from the height calculated from the digital elevation model in GIS. Each of these has an error term on it, which are normally distributed, and the standard error around each of those is quite similar. So for the purposes of this, I just assumed that those two would cancel each other out and just subtracted one from the other. And then what we also then did is look at how they used the habitat. So created a map of, and this is thanks to Boyd, of the whole of the Lesotho Highlands, classifying the landscape into ridge tops, upper slopes, mid slopes, valley bottoms, and so on, and then looked at the relationship between where the birds are foraging and those habitat features. And so there's, just to give you an indication of the points, so you'll see immediately that these birds are sticking to these high-lying areas. All right, so then foraging height. So bearded vultures, from previous publications, if the bird's flying anything sort of less than 75 kilometers an hour, you can consider it to be foraging. So if we subsetted all the data to those that were definitely not roosting, but were in the foraging, 92% of their time in the day is spent foraging, or 92% of the observations were foraging. but 54% of the observations are less than 100 meters in height. Okay, so more than half the time they're flying within that rotor height. So there's immediately a big red flag. Then if you look at the association with habitat, if you look at the observed versus expected habitat use, so this is, the hatched is what you would expect in terms of the proportion of the different habitat types, valleys, plains, mid-slopes and ridges. And the black is the observed proportion of foraging time. So you see on the ridge tops, the birds are actively selecting the ridge tops. They're spending a disproportionate amount of time there, and they are spending less time over the valley areas. Okay, so there's a positive selection for one and a negative selection for the others, and sort of fairly neutral with the rest. Then the other thing is just looking at the wind data that they've been collecting in Lesotho, and you can see so from the morning through to sort of mid-afternoon is your peak time, and that's the peak time when the birds are flying as well. Capes, even a bigger percentage of those observations were less than 100 meters above the ground. So 62% of admittedly a smaller data set. But again, it seems to be they're going to be a lot of the time flying within the turbine height. Okay, and then so what did the models show? So if we look at the growth rate of the population, it's stochastic because the model builds in random elements. And so if you look at the baseline model, bearded's currently declining at 1.4% per annum with 80 wind towers. 80 masts. It'll take it down to, it's like a 200% increase to 3.7% per annum decline. Okay. The capes are actually in more trouble than beardeds at the moment in terms of the rate of decline. But we've got at minus 2.2% at the moment. That'll go down to minus 3.4%. So the population level impact is predicted to be quite significant. What does that mean in terms of numbers of birds killed? Sorry, these graphs are not too clear, but assuming year one is when the wind farms are put in, you're getting sort of 18 or 16 to 18 birds killed in the first year, and then that drops off as you create these vacuum zones around those sites. But sort of averaging sort of around about 4 birds per year killed on those 2 wind farms, on those 80 towers for bearded vultures. And for capes, again, starting at sort of 80 to 90 birds in the first couple of years, but averaging sort of around about 25 birds a year that will be taken out by those two wind farms. And what does that mean in terms of extinction predictions? As we're going at the moment, bearded vultures sort of got that, we've got that amount of time to kind of do something. By adding those 80 towers, you reduce the time to extinction by 150 years. So you sort of fast forward that extinction process quite quickly. And with capes, you bring it forward by 80 years. Okay. And just some just quick graphics before I sort of round up. So this is just, again, just sort of a model output, 500 runs of the model for bearded vultures. This is pre-wind farm, just giving you an idea of what we predict is happening to the population. And you get a picture like that after you put in your 2 wind farms. Cape vultures, a lot more variability in the data, but again, coming down from about 1,400, something like that. And we get to a picture like that. Those birds, in terms of their foraging behavior, the heights that they're flying at and the areas that they're choosing. So what I didn't perhaps emphasize enough, the ridge tops are where the people want to build their wind farms, and then those are the habitats that the birds are selecting. So we're heading for a huge potential conflict, and the 2 proposals that are on the table on their own pose a significant threat to both of these species. Bear in mind, beardeds only occur in this area. It's the last place they left. They're genetically distinct, and capes is an endemic that's under huge pressure. But then remember what I said, add in the effect of all the power lines that goes with this. Already with the bearded vultures that we're tracking, we've lost a number to power line collisions, and you can confirm that because you find them dead under the power lines afterwards. But, and here's the happy part of the story, these are the first 80. Lesotho has a stated aim of generating 6,000 megawatts from wind energy. Okay, which if each tower is 1.5 megawatts, which is kind of like the average, that's 4,000 turbines that we could be seeing on the top of the Drakensberg. All right, so the scale bar would go from 80 years down to a couple of years. So look, I mean, I'm making light of it, but seriously, guys, this is a major threat. And who's buying the power? South Africa. Okay, this is a money-making thing. The power is not needed in Lesotho, and so we need to make sure that our government doesn't sign the wrong sort of agreements with Lesotho that will allow these things to take place in the wrong areas. There are some things that we can look at in terms of mitigation. We do need to urgently get more tracking data on Cape vultures. We need to look at the wind resource in the valleys more. So the engineers will say, no, we've got to have it on the ridge tops because that's where the best wind is. But what's the proportional loss by having some of these things in the valleys? Can we identify some valleys that can still be viable for wind energy? This whole thing of captive breeding, basically at the moment the developers are saying, for every bird we kill, we'll just put another one back. And the person that's going to breed all these birds happens to be the developer who lives in Joburg, and he's going to breed all these birds just to throw back. So there's going to be stuff like that they're going to throw into the process that we just got to be wary of. And so basically just this so-called clean energy is not necessarily green energy. Yeah. So thanks very much.
Thanks very much, Ian. Time for some questions. You are over time, but I don't think anyone's going to kill you now. So Atha was first. Go.
Ian, your model predicted so many birds a year that could be killed by these turbines. Now that could be exacerbated by the age of those birds. Mm-hmm. So if they were breeding birds that were killed, and it's quite possible from where you show those sites to be,